After hearing the story, I stood with the others as we made our way into Hell's hidden halls. Mary was still stuck in herself for whatever reason, but I don't get why she was still upset. I thought Medusa was her because Medusa was so good at pretending. As we passed by Tyre, I saw that a few other people were speaking to him. One was a teenager who had blue hair and a prosthetic arm, who had a serious conversation with Tyre, who glanced my way before he turned away and he signed another child's autograph book. Hell's Halls was truly an impressive place, one that put the goblin market of the Deadlands Desert to shame. There were less people and a lot less children, with the market adjusted to sell more restricted items. And due to the nature of the pumpkin house, the idea of checking IDs for alcohol was meaningless. If you made it this far on your own, then even if you tried to drink an alcoholic drink when you were underage, you'd find that the alcohol was transmuted into a non-alcoholic alternative. I learned that the hard way when I tried buying some wine from a stall, and while it smelled like real wine, when I sipped the red liquid, it was now more akin to grape juice. Same thing with beer being transmuted into sodas or the cannabis chocolate into milk chocolate. And the grins on the sellers' faces every time. They were eager to take my money while giving me something they knew I could never have. All while Mirai and Mercy enjoyed their goods they bought at a cheaper rate, Mary stayed quiet next to me. I don't know if she wanted anything, she didn't tell me, and I didn't ask. After unsuccessfully trying to buy alcohol for a fifth time, I finally sighed and asked the others, "So, how do we go further into the Leviathan lands?" I asked, and Mary just pointed at a sign with an arrow that read, "Speak to Hell, head into the Leviathan lands." Then we discussed going further into the pumpkin house. Mirai and Mary talked about the legend, which I didn't really care too much about. I liked the part about Gleipnir and also the binding Fenrir, but I didn't understand why the gods didn't just kill him. If he was going to be a threat, wouldn't it be smarter to just kill him? Or at least not lose your hand to the wolf? Still, as we passed the other stalls to head into Hell's throne room, I could get a clear look at those we passed. The halls were held up by massive timber pillars, and that held up a roof so high that it looked like a sky above, and indeed the ceiling was painted to resemble the night sky. Maybe because Hell was so far underground that she could only see the sky in a painting, and never see the stars for herself. And the people who worked the stalls all looked like they were dead, or I guess a form of undead. I saw people with blue skin, or transparent skin, with their muscles and organs visibly moving and squirming while they also moved. And unlike the ghouls of the goblin market, I don't think these were made with makeup. Makeup didn't allow for someone to close their eyelids and have their eyes still be visible underneath. Makeup doesn't allow for someone to pour rum into their pocket and leave the pocket completely dry. When we made it to Hell's throne room, it was not what I was expecting. The hall was built like the inside of a cathedral. Pews were all full of skeletons that all looked forward to where the pulpit should be. Each skeleton naked of both flesh and cloth. The distant fireplace burned large with blue flames that, despite itself, burned cold while cold smoke covered our feet and the floors of the throne room. The carpet in the center was not a royal color I recognized. It was a sickly yellow that resembled jaundiced skin. That was the only color I could see through the freezing smoke. And on the distant wall, instead of stained glass, there were carvings in the gray stone, carvings made to resemble the roots of an impossibly large tree. Some symbol I don't recognize. Mercy blanched when she saw the symbol, and Mary glanced towards the symbol, and the one who sat below it, as Mary and I looked at each other before I shrugged and I kept going forward. while everyone else stayed behind, intimidated by the throne and the queen who sat on the throne. Her throne looked like it was made out of glass, and inside of the glass was more of the cold smoke that leaked out of her fireplace. And then there was hell on her throne. Her dress was all black, and it cascaded to cover not just her feet, but also the steps leading up to her throne. It was clearly a very expensive and beautiful material, and it was her face that terrified me the most. On her left side, her skin was transparent and dead, her skeleton clearly visible as she looked at me, and on the other side, her skin was pale and practically one of a model, with flawless skin that would have been stunning if it covered her entire body. And her jewelry was the strangest of all. A dull gray metal made up her crown, which was a simple circle with a large omega on the front of the crown, and the rings on her skeletal hands were made up of the same dull gray metal. Even from this distance, I recognized the metal. My power required me to use many different elements, ingredients, and chemistry for my power to be unlocked. This meant that I got really good at identifying simple ingredients and elements, even from a distance. It could often mean that the difference between a healing draught or painful poison. So even if I could not recognize whatever hell was the goddess of, I could recognize the metal and the symbol on her crown. Her jewelry was made of lead, and the symbol on her head was the alchemical symbol for death. So clearly, this actor was pretending to be a gothic goddess of death. Not bad at all. Did I hand it to you, lady? The props here are top notch. Who's your set designer? This whole death and doom thing is really working for you, he said while I grinned at her, and while ignoring the empty sockets of the skeletons that seemed to stare at me, my friends, who crept closer to me, despite remaining silent, who were as silent as the grave near hell, and I kept ignoring the itching in the middle of my back as hell spoke. Oh, sweet Valero, so quick to dismiss what you do not understand. Tell me, child, do you truly believe this is all just pretend, a mere performance? She asked with a smile that revealed that even her tongue was half missing, leaving behind a thin veneer of blood on her teeth. No, not blood. It had to be corn syrup or chocolate syrup. It couldn't possibly be blood, even if it smelled exactly like arterial blood. Do you think you're in control here? She asked while leaning forward, and her words settled like a heavy stone in my stomach. But I laughed it off. She was an actor and nothing more. She couldn't scare me if I didn't let her. I've seen better tricks on a street corner. You're good, I'll give you that, but you don't scare me, I said with my arms crossed over my white shirt that said, "This is my Feralia costume." Hell remained looming over me. Was she always so tall? Why was I looking up at someone who was sitting on a throne? Ah, yes. Fear is a fickle thing, isn't it? Sometimes it comes too late, she said before I laughed it off. Oh, and is this the part where I scream for my mother? I laughed with a nervous laugh, and I could hear Mary hiss between her teeth, and Mirai covered their face with their hands. Then Mercy stared into Hell's eye, like she couldn't understand what she was saying. Oh, Valero. So bold, so blind. Then perhaps blindness is my profit, no? Tell me, child, do you find my halls lacking? Does the scent of rot not thrill you? Or perhaps you prefer sweeter things? She asked as she glanced away from me and into the darkness at the edges of the hall. Was it always this dark? Rot? You're laying it on thick. I've seen better effects at carnival rides. Is this the part where I scream and beg for mercy? Come on, I said, ignoring the unease in my gut. I had to keep it under control. No matter what she threw my way, I had to remember. I was in control. I was the one with formulas. Beg for mercy? Oh no, dear child. Not yet. You haven't even begun to understand what mercy tastes like here. But perhaps you thirst. Shall we sate you? She asked as she stood up from her throne, leaving a sarcastic bow before she stepped behind me, and I turned to face her, and I saw that she held 4 crystal goblets on a lead platter. Where she got the goblets from, I do not know, but I do know that she stood between me and my friends as she held the tray of goblets out to me. The liquid inside was golden and watery. The goblet held a surprisingly large amount of the mysterious fluid. I grabbed the tray from her, and I sniffed the liquid in the goblets. Inside it smelled intoxicating, decadent, and rich. What is it? I asked Hel as I kept following her progress. She sat back in her throne, her single eye meeting me in the eye, while she answered, It's mercy. There's enough for you and your friends, but be sure to drink it, little charmer, she said as I heard Mary speak, but I didn't hear the words even when I heard her voice. Instead, I lifted the goblet to my lips as I tasted the so-called mercy. It was bittersweet and cool, which was a relief because the hall was starting to feel hotter and hotter. Which was strange. When did the hall go from cold to hot? Swallow after swallow, the taste of mercy changed. It grew less and less sweet, more bitter with every gulp down my throat, but the cooling only spread further and further in my body as I swallowed more and more mercy. Even when my friends tried to grab the goblet from my hands, I finished every drop of Hell's mercy. Still, even when mercy tasted bitter and dark instead of sweet and decadent, I grabbed the second goblet and I chugged this one even quicker than the first. If the first drink was bittersweet, this one was bitter through and through, like tasting pure isopropyl alcohol, a fruity acetone with hints of tape. As I finished it off and I dropped the crystal before grabbing the third goblet. By this point, I became aware of my friends reaching out for the goblets, but they wouldn't take it off of the platter. I don't know why they didn't take it if they wanted it so much. However, I needed to drink. Even if it didn't taste right, the sensation, the power, the sheer power that only grew greater the more I drank it. The third goblet burned my throat and nostrils, so with every breath I took, it hurt. Every heartbeat was electric, and every thought was icy, as the now dark, viscous liquid slithered down my throat, and in seconds I was finally down to my final goblet as I swallowed the last of Hell's Mercy. If you've ever tasted PTC, you would know that the final goblet of mercy tasted like that. It was poison in every drop, that even as I forced it down my throat, my body wanted to throw it up. Still, I forced the drink down. There was something in the drink, something that I craved more and more of as the tingling was in my extremities, even when it tasted like I was drinking liquid cigarettes and fish skin. When I finished, I felt powerful, alive, untouchable, and invincible. Whatever was in Hell's Mercy was a lot like some of my own personal concoctions. And now I had it with me. I realized that no one else got any, and they all stared at me like I did something horrendous. How generous of you to take it all for yourself, Hal said before I had a chance to even explain why I did what I did. And I saw something shift in my friends. It was like a light went out from behind their eyes, and they fell to the ground. But as they fell, I saw their skin crack and dry out like it was made out of clay. and when they fell on the ground, their skin cracked open, and beneath I could see their skeletons peeking out from their shattered skin. Illusions, cheap tricks, none of this is real. I'm not scared. You can't fool me, I said defiantly, my hand shaking as I wanted to cup Mary's shattered body, but I couldn't touch her. If I touched her, then I would either prove the illusion fake, or I would prove it wasn't fake. It's a trick. It's not real, I said, my voice shaking. Oh, but everything is real, until it isn't, she said, and in a blink they were whole again, their eyes wide, and they all stood away from me. And when I tried to take a step towards them, they all stepped away from me. And I turned to Hell, my fists clenched as I stepped towards her, but she didn't even blink at what I did. Ah, such bravado. But tell me, when have you ever truly seen what is real? Is it power you crave, or is it simply the confidence? The lie you wrap yourself in so tight that you choke? She asked, and my throat tightened. How the fuck do you know about that? I demanded before she tapped her bottom lip with a single finger, and I nearly threw up from what that memory drudged up. A memory of telling my brother it was okay, a memory of calling him a coward while he poisoned himself trying to keep up with what I drank. He passed out with his finger on his lip, just like Hell did. Would you like to test your luck again? Hell asked, and before I had a chance to answer, she pointed towards a tapestry on the distant wall. It depicted a place of green grass, blue skies, and a shining sun. A beautiful place that resembled home, and inside of the tapestry I could see my brother inside, waving to me, and my heart tugged into the painting. Whatever effect Hell's drink had on me, now gone. Another choice, Valero. You can leave my court through that tapestry and claim the prize that lies beyond, but you must leave your friends behind. Their time, I'm afraid, has come. They will stay with me for eternity, Hell said, but I barely noticed as I stepped towards the tapestry. And again my friends called out to me, reaching out for me, but not quite grabbing me as I walked to the tapestry. Fine, I'll go, he said as I strode to the tapestry. Their pleas turned to screams. Anguish filled their screams, but I did not look behind me as I stepped into the tapestry, reaching out for my brother's hand, his smile warming my heart. But when I touched his hand, I found myself back in the court of Hell, grabbing her skeletal hand and her smile even wider this time. When I turned behind me, my friend's eyes were hollow, none of them looking towards me anymore. Looking down on the ground, another challenge from Hell, one that I lost? It wasn't a fair challenge. She didn't actually deliver what she promised me. Another victory, yes? So sure of yourself, she said, and my pulse quickened as I clenched my fists, wishing that this was a challenge I could actually fight. Give me a wolf to wrestle, a shark to skin, or a physical challenge. I could handle those easily. These illusions and tricks felt so pointless. I wasn't moving forward, and I didn't know what I could possibly do to move forward. One more, then. You've proven something, I suppose. But tell me, what would you choose if you knew your time was nearly up? Hell asked as the hall felt different. The fire in the hearth no longer burned cold. It burned like a blast furnace, and I could feel the shadows creep closer. And in that moment, there was just Hell on her throne, final rest, myself, and the flames inferno. Crackling flames filled my mind, and I feared the flames getting any closer, because they would burn me and all that I stood for. A door waits, Valero. Choose wisely. Would you face the flames now, or watch as your soul is slowly consumed by ice and fire over centuries? A quick death or a slow one? After all, you've faced worse, haven't you? She asked, and I felt the pain in my heart again. This bitch wasn't an actor. She was hell, and she hurt like hell. Still, even as the flames roared and hell smirked, I refused to bow down to fear. I'll take the slow burn, I said. Hell laughed at my answer, but the fire cooled. Ah, how brave, or perhaps how foolish, she said as Inferno burned down, and the light returned so I could see my friends again. And behind where Hell sat, a door opened that led deeper into the Leviathan lands. You may go, Valero, not because you've earned it, not because you've learned, but because you'll come back to me when your bones are as hollow as those you left behind. My court is patient, and we have all the time in the world. Your time, on the other hand. She stopped there, but it was enough as I stepped forward and my terrified friends followed behind me to the door. Even whole in body, their minds were clearly shaken or even shattered by what happened. I could not spare any thoughts towards them, though. Instead, my mind lingered on the echo of Hell's words. Hell is no illusion. She is waiting. Always. I don't know how they changed the environment so quickly, but it went from a desert at sunset to a forest with an aurora above. The trees around us stood hundreds of meters tall, and there were dozens or even hundreds of paths through the woods. Every sign pointed towards something else, and when I ran my fingers across them as I read what they said, they pointed to places with names I did not recognize. Land of the Lost, Backroads, Crooked Mile, Forgotten Fields, Nowhere, Ichor Falls, Night Vale, and even a place called Roswell. All such strange names, and were clearly not where we were looking for. And then there were signs that pointed to places I did recognize, but still wanted to avoid. Exclusion Zone, Elsewhere, Vigrid, Valley of Peace, Okigahara, and even a sign pointing towards the Red Iron Bridge. But it was one sign that pointed the way we needed to go. The sign pointing towards the exit. And even though everyone else still wasn't talking, they did listen when I pointed towards the exit sign. We began to make our way towards the Wonderland Wastes when I felt the heavy steps of our next challenge. I stood to the side of a tree as the heavy steps went from being just felt to also heard as the gargantuan creature took its first steps where we could all see it. When it stepped into view, I heard Mirai took a sharp inhale when the first rattles could be heard. The rattling steps were like that of an impossibly large chain. The Odakuro glanced around while we saw the impossibly large skeleton. It stood at least 20 meters tall, and its massive bare bones dug into the bark as it glanced around every movement and made rattling noises. And when it stepped closer to us, I saw what it was made of. The kaiju-sized skeleton was made up of thousands, or maybe hundreds of thousands of smaller bones, all of them tied together, with sinew as the undead titan stepped forward, still not noticing us as it continued on its journey. And even though my hands shook in fear, I kept silent. I knew the story of Odakuro from Mirai. It was a very dangerous yokai that was made up of the bones of soldiers who died in battle or by starvation, and now they seek people out to kill them, and because the Odakuro was already dead, it could not be killed again. It would take a powerful priest to get it to retreat, let alone think about fighting it. The only reason we were alive was because we were too small for Odakuro to worry about, especially since it could travel silently or invisibly if it felt like it. As the monster traveled further from us and I could finally breathe again, Mary hugged me and I hugged her back. Her tears were on my shoulders as I heard her speak. After what happened in Hell's Halls, I thought I was going to stay angry at you, but when that thing came by, I wouldn't have forgiven myself if it took you away. Even with what you did in Hell's Hall, you don't deserve such a fate, she said, and I found my opportunity. Wait, what did you see in Hell's Hall? I knew she was creating illusions, but I didn't know it at the time. I told her, and she looked up at my eyes and she asked, "Really? But the tapestry? The drinks? The fire?" she asked, and Mirai and Mercy also eyed me as I explained. "So that's what you all saw? But that isn't what I saw. I saw that she was offering you poison, and I had to drink it to stop it. Then, with the tapestry, I saw a vicious wolf trying to get in, so I fought it off. And then with the fire, I thought wildfire was going to take you all if I didn't speak up. Hell must have created a different illusion to make us angry at each other. If we don't work together, we won't make it through the Leviathan lands," he said, and I could see the connection in Mary's eyes as she smiled and hugged me again. She had such a gentle heart, one that if she had even a drop of doubt about herself, she would listen to someone else's plans. Mercy still had some doubts about me, but she was also smart enough to keep her mouth shut. And Mirai, it didn't matter if Mirai believed me or not. They would have made even worse choices than I did. But all that mattered was that Mary believed me. We continued further into the Leviathan lands, hand in hand. The trees were peaceful with animal sounds as we got closer and closer to the exit. It was not what I expected out of a haunted house. Not until we saw our next challenge. Fenrir was tied to a rock, and in his open mouth was a key. And only a few meters from the exit, and when I saw Fenrir, I didn't know what I was expecting. I thought a god-killing wolf would be titanic, with teeth the size of mountains and saliva that created rivers, while Fenrir was large, at least 4 meters long, and even tied to the ground, his shoulders were taller than I was. His eyes were shut as he gently snored, and I could see the key. An old-fashioned iron key in the mouth, just deep enough that I would have to reach up to my upper arm. I looked at everyone else, and they all stared at me expectantly. Of course they did. This was my challenge. That was the nature of the pumpkin house, and I would need to face this by myself. I crept closer and closer to Fenrir as I paid attention to his breathing, and as I got closer, I could smell his metallic breath that smelled of copper and almonds and fresh grass for some reason. Smelling the almonds and freshly cut grass, I made a connection as I held my breath and reached into my side bag to grab a familiar, glowing yellow vial, sipping it as I felt the minty flavor fill my mouth and slowly spread across my body. The taste of durability, a formula made with a mixture of several different cleaners, including ammonia and bleach, and mint for flavor, one to make me durable, especially recognizing the smell of copper and almonds. Copper is also the smell of fresh blood before it had the chance to clot, so Fenrir ate recently, and the almond scent was even more deadly. Cyanide smells like almonds, and that's usually your first sign that you're exposed to cyanide. And the smell of freshly mown grass is an even deadlier sign. I knew plenty of veterans who immediately got sick from the smell of grass, because it was the smell of chemical weapons. Fenrir wasn't just physically dangerous, his breath was chlorine gas, his saliva was cyanide, and I didn't want to be around long enough to know what his blood was made from. Still, with my own formula, should make me immune to danger for a while. So I paid attention to Fenrir's careful breaths as I reached my hand into his warm mouth. Every breath felt sticky and hot as I brushed my fingers on the iron key. And as I lifted the key, Fenrir's eyes shot open, and his teeth around my hand clenched as I tried desperately to pull out both the key and my hand, as his teeth clanged against my iron-hard skin. My fingers wrapped around the key, I kept pulling, even with my friends pulling on my body as well, while I made the mistake of looking Fenrir in the eyes, as I could see that he didn't clamp down on my hand as hard as he could. I heard a crack in my arm as the teeth continued to press down on my arm like a vice. The next crack I felt in my arm as I screamed from the pain. My teeth were grinding into each other as I watched Fenrir's eyes, as the wolf was still nowhere near as strong as he could get, as he bit even harder on my arm, and I could see in his eyes that he expected me to cry out, to beg him for mercy, or even just ask him to let my arm loose. If Fenrir was expecting me to beg for my life, I was not going to. Even as I felt more and more cracks across my hardened skin, I still did not beg, and instead I stared into Fenrir's eyes as I spoke. Even if you break my skin, I won't let go. Even if you shatter my bones, I won't let go. Even if you separate my hand from my body, I will not let go. I don't care how deadly you are, Fenrir. I assure you, my blood is deadlier. I warned him, and he could see in my eyes, as he spat out my hand, cracks visible across my skin, as I held my arm close to me. Thankfully, my vulnerable flesh underneath was untouched, and I could treat it easily enough, but still, that unsettled me. Nothing was supposed to be able to scratch my iron skin like that, let alone crack it. If Fenrir continued, he would have taken off my hand. While I wasn't certain if my blood would have actually poisoned Fenrir, I was confident enough to lie to him about it. But that didn't help the dark thoughts that followed me as we walked to the door leading to the Wonderland Wastes. As I turned the key and my friends entered, I turned back to where Fenrir lay tied up. His teeth bared at me, as it was clear to me what he was saying to me. He let me go because he could let me go. Didn't matter how strong my formula made me. Fenrir could have broken me if he wanted to. I felt more vulnerable in this one night than I have every other day of my life. I would have to make sure that I would never be vulnerable again.